like a dream, afloat on a silent sea. In the untamed reaches of the Northlands, vast millions of miles beyond imagination, where beauty exceeds the words to describe it. Living was hard, conditions harsh, and people were few. Into the lands of the native peoples, an occasional stranger would come. A special breed of independent mind and iron will. Such were the people of the Yukon. Those who were one with the land, the traders, the trappers, the dreamers of rugged dreams. Until the summer of 1896, when George Carmack, Skookum Jim, and Dawson Charlie plucked a nugget from Bonanza Creek. A nugget of Klondike gold.
I wanted the gold, and I sought it. I scrabbled and mucked like a slave. Was it famine or scurvy? I fought it. I hurled my youth into a grave. I wanted the gold, and I got it. Came out with a fortune last fall. Yet somehow, life's not what I thought it. And somehow the gold isn't all.
With pick and axe they came, with gold pans and bone-cold hands, with sheer will and the determination that forges nations and moves mountains. They came by the hundreds, the thousands, the tens of thousands. They came to the Yukon, the Klondike, for gold. And move mountains they did. The bucket line dredge clanked and banged and thundered through the valleys and creek beds of the Klondike gold fields. The gold dredges of the late 19th and early 20th centuries were massive mechanical wonders made of iron and steel. Like a ship set sail with no place to go, floating on a pond of its own making. The dredge scooped up, swallowed, and spit out the land around it. Anchored to bedrock by the incredible weight of its spud, the dredge could pivot from side to side, gaining access to an ever-broadening sweep of shoreline. Whether panning, using a sluice box or a dredge, the process of separating the gold from the rocks, gravel, and dirt is pretty much the same. Throw away the big rocks, let the heavier gold settle beneath the gravel, wash away the dirt. But the dredges do it in a big way. The washing trommel, like a large, long, perforated barrel flushed with water, the trommel turns, dropping small gravel, gold, and dirt through its holes into the sluice boxes below. Large rocks and debris are carried up the stacker by the conveyor and deposited at the tail of the dredge. Thus, the term tailings. Emptying the sluice boxes of their bounty is called cleanup. The task that made the job worthwhile almost 100 years ago brings a smile to workers still today. Klondike Gold Dredge, while sporting the handsome pilot house and wooden superstructure, floats on monstrous metal pontoons. Those involved in the history of the dredge and moving it from 60-mile to Skagway speak of it this way.
The 60-mile dredge, as far as I know, was built by Washington Iron Works in Seattle, and it was designed by Walter Johnson in his office in San Francisco. When it was completed, it was sent to Wallace, Idaho, and it was erected there for Sunshine Mining Company. Was subsequently from Wallace shipped to the Yukon. And the year of that shipment would have been probably in 1940 or 42. And because of the war, it ran into problems as far as getting it to its final destination on Big Gold Creek in the 60-mile district, because all mining was prohibited under the act of the War Act. So it laid in pieces, most of it, I thought, in Dawson.
I got out of the Army in December 1945. The dredge had been stockpiled in Dawson sometime during the war years, and was not hauled out to 60-mile until late 46 and 47, and it was assembled in 47 and started digging in 47.
Just over the hill there. 40-mile goes up that way and 60-mile goes that way too. Then you just go over the hill and for Brooks, he was the only one that I know of. He hauled the dredge. I don't know how many years it took him to get it over there.
It was loaded on a White Pass steamboat and brought to Skagway. Then it was transferred from the steamboat to the White Pass Railroad, brought to Whitehorse. And when we got to Whitehorse, it was transferred onto the river barges. It went down the river to Dawson and was offloaded in Dawson City.
Yes, the Yukon Exploration hauled the dredge out from Dawson to 60-mile, assembled the dredge, and I was working for that company at that time. And they started to dig in the fall of 47.
The company that I was driving for at the time was called McCormick's Transportation. And he had the contract to haul it from Dawson City over what we call the 60-mile. The road was nothing but a goat trail, and it was not maintained at all. And when we had a wet summer, we had nothing but mud axle deep. As you can see in some of those pictures, we were mired in pretty good a lot of times, a lot of places. We used to carry a couple of poles on our truck, so we got stuck in the mud, all we'd chain ourselves out was through poles, which I don't think anybody nowadays will ever know how to do that.
And before the first time, there was some other company, then Franklin and Smitty got it.
Sunshine Mining Company backed out, and Yukon Exploration was formed and took over the obligation from Sunshine to move the dredge out to 60-mile. And we, Yukon Placer Mining Company, made it what amounted to a joint venture with Transcontinental Resources Limited, that we would bring our open cut cat operation to the 60-mile, Big Gold, and we would work on Glacier Creek, which is adjacent to Big Gold, and we would get the dredge ground ready for the dredge to operate on and carry on from there.
From 1947 until 1951, I was hand mining for myself on Glacier Creek. And the company, Yukon Placer Mining Company, at that time intended to start the dredge and asked me to come down if I go to work for them. And I did.
My job was, I was the winchman. You got to run the whole dredge. You know, I had one man, there's two of us at 60-mile anyway. The oil man, there was an old man there. I guess he was, must have been 80 now, then. Finally he died. He was an old trapper.
Well, when I went for Franklin, at that time on the dredge, it was a diesel electric dredge, and my job was looking after the engines. But besides looking after the engines, I also helped with the cleanup, some repair work at times, and made myself generally useful around the place.
Jim Lynch was a very fine man, extremely hard worker, and he worked better if he was on a job that he could do by himself.
I like to work by myself, and I'm not much use working with a gang. I will work with a gang, but I personally work by myself.
Jim would crank up the 671 diesel and blast the muck for all he was worth. To manufacture that mobile water monitor, yeah. That was, a lot of that idea was Lynch's idea, as a matter of fact. We built it in the shop, of course, but so the only way to do it is do it his way, and then he couldn't complain. I love that guy.
I used to play the bugle. Then a big moose come along, and Jesus, I didn't have my gun, so we had to go all the way to camp. And that old blooded moose, he was just a snorting along there.
We had a good year in 1952. We took out $275,380.
He was a pretty good guy, and he was giving us more money.
If the ground was good, they were happy.
I met Mr. Jimmy Lynch, I believe, before I ever seen the dredge. And then through the years, as I went by the 60-mile, I know he lived out there somewhere. And one day I seen him at his cabin at the 60-mile on Glacier Creek, so I stopped in, and from there on we got well acquainted with each other.
I was really impressed with Jimmy. He was very honorable. He was an Englishman. He'd been in the last war, shot up pretty good. Come north and moved over into 60-mile.
Well, Jim had been on Glacier Creek before we came over in 1947. He had been doing some mining there on his own, and then he went to work for us. And he still had ground that he could mine on Glacier Creek. So when we pulled out, we told him that he could stay, as far as we were concerned, stay at the camp, and that we were going to drop the claims, and he could go ahead and stake the claims. That way he would have ownership of anything that was left on the property.
So one day I stopped by Jimmy Lynch's lots of times to visit with him. But one day I decided to stop and ask him if he would sell me the dredge. I said, Jimmy, you want to sell that dredge to me? And he said, well, Ron, I never thought about it, but yeah, if you want to buy it, I'll sell it to you.
This was in 1979. Every year or so I'd see Tom, he'd say, we're going to do some of that dredge, Ron. We're going to do something. Well, you know. Anyway, as time went by, and then in 99, he got the idea of moving this dredge to Skagway. So from there on, it just went full steam ahead. Everything went go then.
Well, Tom phoned Dad and said, well, we haven't raised the money, but let's just go do it. That's not right. Tom phoned me and said, well, we haven't raised the money, but let's just go do it. So I said, yeah, okay, Tom, let's just go do it. And so I phoned Dad, and he said, you guys can't just go do it, go on a shoestring. He said, it takes money to do something like that. You don't just move this thing on a whim.
So Tom Hall come along and said, hey, we got to move this dredge. I said, when? Right now. I said, Tom, you're dreaming. I said, this is winter now. You won't even get this thing tore down before there's 2 foot of snow around here. You're not going to move this dredge. We're moving it, he said. What am I going to say? Okay, Tom.
I think that we got hauled in on someone else's dream.
People have a dream.
And we did it. We accomplished it. What people said we couldn't do, and we did it.
It was a lot of hard work and not giving up. And lots of that work was up high. There was 4 or 5 of us working there all the time. And putting in 10 hours a day, trying to get that thing up before the snow flies in Skagway. Amazingly, we didn't have any trouble putting it back together.
It went perfect. We moved the dredge and it went absolutely perfect.
People are always interested in gold.
Truthfully, I'd like to just fire this thing right back up again.
The gold rush is what built the railroad. What we're trying to do is bring a piece of mining history to Skagway, because Skagway's roots was because of the gold rush.
All of us that have been working on the dredge knows it's been a very important part of the history of the Klondike. And it just makes me kind of proud to be able to be working on it.
You've got to appreciate every moment them old-timers put into this. When you move it out, it's not the accomplishment that they accomplished.
The young men of the Klondike, the miners, the risk-takers of a time which will never return, wrote not a paragraph nor a page, but a chapter in the book of all that is great within man. It may be a story of gold, but it is surely a story of life in those not too timid to live it. The movers of mountains, the dreamers of dreams, will forever be a part of this amazing land.
At first it was all about gold, just gold.
Yeah, it was a tough job all the time.
You could never do now what we did then.
It was a hard life.
You had to love it, and you had to work or you went hungry.
Oh, you had to love it.
It was a good life, a free life.
And it was the land.
Those things you'll never, ever see again. That type of operation or people dealing that way.
Well, it don't matter where it's at, but it's always quiet now. And before it was always noisy.
Well, some people think that a dredge makes an awful lot of noise. To me, it's more like a song.
There's gold, and it's haunting and haunting. It's luring me on as of old. Yet it isn't the gold that I'm wanting, so much as just finding the gold. It's the great, big, broad land way up yonder. It's the forest where silence has lease. It's the beauty that thrills me with wonder. It's the stillness that fills me with peace.
To me, it's more like a song.